Thank you, Morris. Hello, everybody. So excited to be here in Philadelphia. You know, I know that's just the usual pandering that goes on by speakers, but in my case, it happens to be true. I am not myself from Philadelphia, but my dad, Jerry Toobin, was Overbrook High School. All right, yeah. Hey, look, the pandering has just begun. Don't worry. Curtis Institute. I don't know if we have any other violinists here. And he went to Temple as well. So, you know, and he taught me that the streets were paved with tasty cakes here, and I have enjoyed my visits ever since. I'm really happy to be talking about The Oath today. It only came out 2 days ago. So far, so good. You know, it's exciting to find, you know, you work on these books in silence and quiet, and then, wow, like people actually read them. It's exciting. So let me start by asking the first question that I know is on your mind, which is, who's your favorite justice? Now, it's not Elena. She has to earn it. She's only been there, you know, a year and a half so far. I'm still struggling with that question because for so long, my favorite justice was David Souter, because he was so delightfully odd. He didn't have a cell phone. He didn't have a computer. He didn't have an answering machine on his phone. He was late for William Rehnquist's funeral because they couldn't leave a message and find out where he was. He doesn't like electric light. He moves his chair around his office over the course of the day to catch the sunlight. It's a true story. But the great thing about Justice Souter was that he sort of got the joke about being a Supreme Court justice. He understood that he was important, but it wasn't really all about him. And I'll just give you one example of that. For reasons that remain obscure, David Souter and Stephen Breyer are frequently mistaken for each other. Now, if you know what they look like, they really don't look anything alike. But, you know, people only have a vague sense of who these justices are. And one time, not too long ago, Justice Souter, as he often did, was driving from Washington to his home in New Hampshire, and he stopped at a little restaurant to get something to eat. And a couple came up to him, and the guy said, "I know you. You're on the Supreme Court, right?" He said, "Yeah." He says, "You're Stephen Breyer, right?" And Souter didn't want to embarrass the fellow in front of his wife, so he said, "Yes, I'm Stephen Breyer." But then they chatted for a little while, and the guy said, "So Justice Breyer, what's the best thing about being on the Supreme Court?" He thought for a minute, and he said, "I'd have to say it's the privilege of serving with David Souter." Now, how can you not love a guy like that? So I'm taking nominations for my favorite justice after that. Okay, so let's talk about the current Supreme Court by the numbers, for starters. Well, there are 6 men and 3 women. First time in history, there are 3 women on the court. There are 6 Catholics and 3 Jews. What, no applause, no Catholics, no Jews here? Yeah, 6, no Protestants for first time in history. There are representatives of 4 New York City boroughs on the Supreme Court. There is Justice Sotomayor from the Bronx, Justice Scalia from Queens, Justice Ginsburg from Brooklyn, and Justice Kagan from Manhattan. Tragically, Staten Island is unrepresented on the Supreme Court, but you know, you never know when there might be vacancies, and we might address that gap. There are 6 products of Harvard Law School and 3 products of Yale Law School on the Supreme Court. There are apparently no other law schools in the United States besides those 2. No, it is a bizarre and unfortunate fact, I think, actually. Okay, but those are, I hope, interesting facts about the Supreme Court. But frankly, I don't think they're very important. Here's an important fact about the Supreme Court. There are 5 Republicans and 4 Democrats. I will speak for somewhat longer, but this is basically all you need to know. If there's a takeaway here, I have gotten to the point early. There are 5 Republicans and 4 Democrats, and that really tells you much of what you need to know. And it is true that the justices wear robes because they're supposed to look all alike, and they're supposed to look, it's supposed to give the perception that they're all pretty much the same. But just as on the other side of First Street, the United States Congress is deeply divided according to party, so is the United States Supreme Court. And this is a moment of real partisan division at the Supreme Court, and that is exemplified in case after case. Why this moment is so important, I think, you need to go back in history in the Supreme Court. To a different period in the court, to the mid-'60s and the late '60s, because that was the last time the Supreme Court was really a unified ideological force. It was not divided so narrowly. There were 7 liberals on the Supreme Court in sort of the late days of the Warren Court, and there was a real liberal agenda. Every Saturday morning, Chief Justice Warren and his great deputy, William Brennan, would meet together, and they'd say, well, what cases do we want to take? Where do we want to move the law? I mean, they really had ideas about how to move the law, and year after year, they changed cases. They changed the law. 1964, Justice Brennan's famous opinion in New York Times against Sullivan, revolutionizing libel law with important new protections for the press. 1965, Justice William O. Douglas's opinion in Griswold versus Connecticut, the case that established the right to privacy. It said that married couples could not be denied the right to buy birth control. 1966, Chief Justice Warren's opinion in Miranda versus Arizona, revolutionizing criminal procedure and perhaps more importantly, changing television dramas forever. 1967, perhaps the best named case in Supreme Court history, Loving versus Virginia. What was the case of Loving versus Virginia about? It was the case that said states could no longer ban racial intermarriage. Think about that, 1967. There are people in this room who were alive in 1967. And it was still illegal in in lots of states for racial intermarriage. And then when Barack Obama's parents got married in Kenya, it's such a cheap joke, and I apologize for that. But it does remind me that, everybody knows Mitt Romney is having a rough patch as presidential candidate, but all right, yeah. But a sentence that I have not heard uttered anywhere is, if only Donald Trump had been the nominee. Because as you recall, he sort of built his campaign around the idea that Barack Obama was born in Kenya or somewhere other than the United States. But that campaign did not take off exactly, and Mitt Romney is there for better or worse. It is, and in all seriousness, when Barack Obama's parents got married in 1960, and it was in Kenya. It was in Hawaii. It was not a Freudian slip. That was just wrong. They got married in Hawaii. There were people in prison in this country for racial intermarriage. I mean, that's no joke. It was illegal in 20 states in 1960, and it just gives you an idea of how much the country has changed in a good way. But right after Richard Nixon became president, 4 vacancies appeared on the Supreme Court. You never know how that's going to work. Jimmy Carter is the only president in American history to serve a full term without having a single nominee. There were no vacancies while there. But Richard Nixon was only president for 5.5 years. You'll recall he had to leave early, remember? But he got 4 appointments to the Supreme Court because Chief Justice Warren left, Abe Fortas, John Harlan, and Hugo Black left. And they were replaced by Richard Nixon with Chief Justice Warren Burger, Harry Blackmun, Lewis Powell, and William Rehnquist. And as you think about that list, it illustrates a theme that I think it's a very important part of the oath, but it is the theme of American politics over the past generation, and that is the evolution of the Republican Party. It is the most important story in American politics. It is the most important story in the Supreme Court. because moderate Republicans dominated